The Regional Quality Director told the executive team that the compliance gap identified during the inspection had resulted from the pharmacovigilance function's failure to flag the safety signal in time. My role was named. The word failure appeared in the briefing document she had prepared. The inspection report issued by the Health Products Regulatory Authority contained a specific notation. It referenced internal safety signal documentation submitted by a member of the pharmacovigilance compliance team 6 months before the inspection. It noted the documentation had been received at the management level and not actioned. My name is Aoife. I had spent 9 years in pharmacovigilance compliance, the last 3 as Senior Pharmacovigilance Compliance Specialist at a multinational pharmaceutical distribution company with its regional headquarters in Dublin, Ireland. The company distributed pharmaceutical products across European markets and operated under the licensing and pharmacovigilance obligations administered by national medicines regulatory authorities in each jurisdiction, with the Health Products Regulatory Authority, the HPRA, as our primary competent authority for the Irish and broader regional operations. Pharmacovigilance is the practice of monitoring the safety of medicines after they reach the market, identifying signals and adverse event data that might indicate a safety concern requiring regulatory attention, and ensuring those signals are evaluated, escalated, and reported through the appropriate channels within defined timeframes. The obligations are statutory. The timelines are binding. The documentation requirements are exacting because the consequences of a missed signal are not administrative, but human. My role was to monitor incoming adverse event data, identify signals that met the threshold for formal evaluation, prepare the signal detection reports that initiated the evaluation process, and escalate findings through the quality management system to the regional quality function for management review and regulatory action. I had built a solid technical record in that function: signal detection that was timely, documentation that was precise, and escalation records that were complete. My regional quality director was a woman named Siobhan. She had held the regional quality leadership role for 4 years, had the executive team's confidence on regulatory matters, and had a specific pattern in her management of the pharmacovigilance function that I had navigated carefully since her arrival. She treated signal escalations as quality management inputs that required her assessment before any regulatory action was taken, and she had, on multiple occasions, delayed or deferred escalations that she assessed as requiring further internal review before proceeding to the HPRA. The safety signal I had submitted 6 months before the inspection was a cluster pattern in post-marketing adverse event data for one of the distributed products, a specific signal type that the company's pharmacovigilance standard operating procedures identified as requiring formal evaluation and regulatory notification within defined timelines. I had prepared the signal detection report, submitted it through the quality management system, and escalated it to Siobhan's function with the required timeline notation. The quality management system had logged the submission, the escalation, and the timeline. 6 months later, the HPRA arrived for a routine pharmacovigilance inspection. They asked for the signal detection records. The inspection had been scheduled 6 weeks in advance. Routine inspections in the pharmacovigilance framework operate on a published cycle, and the company had received the standard notification and prepared the inspection readiness documentation through Siobhan's quality function. I had not been involved in the inspection preparation process. My involvement in inspections had historically been limited to providing technical documentation when requested during the inspection itself.
The HPRA's inspection team spent 2 days on site. On the second day, they asked to speak with the pharmacovigilance compliance team directly. I attended that session alongside 2 other members of the function. The session covered our signal detection methodology, our documentation practices, and our escalation procedures. The inspectors were thorough and technically precise. They asked about specific cases in the adverse event database, about the criteria we applied in signal threshold assessments, and about the timeline between signal identification and formal escalation. One of the inspectors asked about the specific signal I had submitted 6 months earlier. She referenced it by the product name and the adverse event category. She asked when it had been identified, when it had been submitted, and what regulatory action had followed. I told her it had been identified and submitted through the quality management system on the date my report showed, 6 months earlier, with the required timeline notation. I told her I was not aware of what regulatory action had followed, as the regulatory notification process sat within the quality function rather than within my role. She noted that without elaborating further. The session concluded. The inspection report was issued 3 weeks later. I read it the same day it was received by the quality function. My function head had distributed it to the compliance team as a matter of practice. The notation about my signal submission was in the section addressing pharmacovigilance system deficiencies. It stated that a safety signal had been identified and formally submitted by the pharmacovigilance compliance function within the required timeline, had been received at the quality management level, and had not been escalated to the competent authority within the statutory notification period. The gap between the submission date and the required notification deadline was stated precisely. The inspection report was a regulatory document, prepared independently by the competent authority based on records the company had produced during the inspection. It said what the record showed. And what the record showed was that the signal had been submitted on time and had not been acted upon at the level that received it. I read the notation twice. Then, I read the executive briefing document Siobhan had circulated the same day, which attributed the compliance gap to the pharmacovigilance function's failure to flag the signal in time. The 2 documents said directly opposite things. I spent the evening after receiving both documents, organising my records and thinking carefully about the sequence of steps I was going to take. The inspection report was a public regulatory document. It would be filed with the HPRA and retained in the company's regulatory record. Its notation about the signal submission was not a claim I was making. It was a finding the competent authority had made based on records produced under oath of accuracy during a statutory inspection.
The notation would remain in the regulatory record regardless of anything Siobhan said to the executive team. What the executive team had received, the same day as the inspection report, was a briefing document that contradicted the inspection report's findings. The briefing document named my function and used the word failure. The inspection report cited my submission as timely and identified the failure at the management level. The 2 documents could not both be accurate. Any executive who read both carefully would recognise the contradiction. The question was whether any executive had read both carefully. My assessment was that the speed of Siobhan's briefing, circulated the same day the inspection report arrived, was designed to establish the narrative before the inspection report's notation was examined closely. People who receive a briefing document from a quality director on a regulatory outcome tend to accept that characterization as authoritative, particularly when the inspection report is technical and dense, and the briefing is clear and accessible. The briefing shapes how the inspection report is read. I needed to put the inspection report's specific notation in front of someone with authority before the briefing document's narrative consolidated. The company's global quality VP sat above Siobhan in the quality hierarchy and reported to the chief executive. She was based in the company's global headquarters, but had direct oversight of regional quality functions and was copied on all significant regulatory correspondence. The board's compliance committee was chaired by an independent non-executive director whose remit included pharmacovigilance governance and regulatory compliance obligations. I prepared a single document, 5 pages, organized around the factual contradiction between the 2 documents received that day. I quoted the inspection report's notation in full, with the HPRA reference and the specific page citation. I quoted the relevant passage from Siobhan's briefing document. I attached my signal detection report with its quality management system submission timestamp. I attached the quality management system escalation record showing the submission, the receipt at quality management level, and the absence of subsequent action within the statutory timeline. I sent the document to the Global Quality VP and the Board Compliance Committee Chair simultaneously on a Thursday evening, with a subject line that referenced the HPRA inspection report directly. The Global Quality VP responded within 90 minutes of my submission. It was early morning in her time zone. Her response confirmed receipt and said she had read the inspection report and my document together and would be convening a call the following morning with her team and with the Board Compliance Committee Chair. The call the following morning was attended by the Global Quality VP, the Board Compliance Committee Chair, the company's Head of Legal, and me. It lasted 1 hour and 50 minutes. The Global Quality VP opened by stating that she had read the HPRA inspection report's pharmacovigilance deficiency section in full, and that the finding was unambiguous. The signal had been submitted by the compliance function within the required timeline and had not been escalated to the HPRA within the statutory notification period. She said this before asking me a single question. She was establishing what the regulatory document said, independently of anyone's characterization of it. She then asked me to walk through the signal detection process for the specific submission, the identification, the documentation, the submission, and my understanding of what the escalation pathway beyond my function required. I did so from my records, which I had brought in full. I described the adverse event cluster, the threshold assessment, the report preparation, and the quality management system submission. I described the timeline notation I had included, which referenced the statutory deadline for regulatory notification. I described my understanding that the notification step sat within the quality function rather than within my role. The Board Compliance Committee Chair asked whether I had, at any point after the submission, followed up on its status or received any communication about the regulatory notification having been made. I told her I had not followed up. The submission had moved out of my function's responsibility at the point of quality management receipt, and follow-up on regulatory notification was not part of my role's defined scope. I told her I had received no communication about the notification status. The Head of Legal asked whether the quality management system records were accessible to the Global Quality VP's team directly. The Global Quality VP confirmed she had already requested access and had reviewed the submission record, the receipt notation, and the absence of subsequent action.
The call concluded with the Global Quality VP stating that the company would be responding to the HPRA's inspection report with a corrective action plan within the required 30-day window, and that the plan would accurately reflect the factual sequence the records showed. She said she would be in contact with me regarding the corrective action program's structure. The corrective action plan was submitted to the HPRA within the required period. I was not involved in drafting it, but I was informed of its content before submission. It described the signal detection and submission process as having functioned correctly, attributed the regulatory notification failure to a quality management process gap at the escalation level, and committed to a series of governance and procedural changes. The HPRA acknowledged receipt and indicated the corrective action plan was under assessment. The governance changes that followed were communicated to me in 2 stages over the 3 weeks after the corrective action plan's submission. The first stage, communicated by the Global Quality VP directly, addressed the regulatory notification pathway. The escalation process for signal detection reports would be restructured so that submitted reports with statutory notification timelines generated automatic notifications to both the regional quality function and the Global Quality VP's office simultaneously. The notification would include the statutory deadline and would escalate automatically to the Board Compliance Committee Chair if the deadline passed without documented regulatory action. My function's submission would no longer depend on the regional quality function's discretion for regulatory notification. The deadline would be visible to multiple levels of authority from the moment of submission. The second stage, communicated by the Board Compliance Committee Chair, addressed Siobhan's position. Her oversight authority for pharmacovigilance regulatory notifications was removed with immediate effect. The pharmacovigilance compliance function's regulatory interface was restructured to report directly to the Global Quality VP for matters involving statutory notification timelines, bypassing the regional quality layer. Siobhan's role was subsequently restructured in a way that removed her from pharmacovigilance governance entirely. Her departure from the company followed approximately 4 months after the inspection report was issued. I was appointed to lead the corrective action program's implementation. The redesign of the notification pathway, the update to the standard operating procedures, and the training program for the quality functions teams across the regional markets. The appointment was framed as reflecting the compliance function's demonstrated technical accuracy and the need for someone who understood the pharmacovigilance obligations at the level the corrections required. The corrective action program took 5 months to implement fully. The notification pathway redesign was completed first, the technical changes to the quality management system that created the simultaneous notification and automatic escalation mechanism. The standard operating procedures were updated to reflect the new pathway, with explicit documentation of each function's responsibilities at each stage of the signal to notification process. The training program was delivered across the regional quality and pharmacovigilance teams in 3 countries. The HPRA conducted a follow-up assessment of the corrective action plan's implementation 8 months after the original inspection. The assessment confirmed that the procedural and governance changes had been implemented as committed. The pharmacovigilance system deficiency finding from the original inspection was formally closed. I want to examine the specific decision to send my document to both the Global Quality VP and the Board Compliance Committee Chair simultaneously on the evening the inspection report arrived because the timing was deliberate and the dual recipient choice was structural. The timing was deliberate because Siobhan's briefing document had been circulated the same day as the inspection report, establishing a narrative before the inspection report's notation had been read carefully by the people with authority to act on it. Every hour that passed without a correction to that narrative was an hour in which the narrative could consolidate, in which the executive team could form a view that had been shaped by the briefing rather than by the regulatory document. I had read both documents. I had seen the contradiction. I had the record that demonstrated which one was accurate. The appropriate response was to put that record in front of the right people immediately, not the following week. The dual recipient choice was structural. The Global Quality VP had direct oversight authority over the regional quality function and the ability to act on both the regulatory remediation and the governance question about Siobhan's conduct. But she was also part of the quality hierarchy. Her relationship with the regional function meant that a submission to her alone could potentially be managed as an internal quality matter before it reached the board level. Sending simultaneously to the Board Compliance Committee chair meant that an independent director with governance oversight had received the same documents at the same time, through a channel that did not pass through any quality function layer. The Board Compliance Committee chair was, in the pharmacovigilance context, the governance stakeholder with both the authority and the fiduciary responsibility to ensure the company's regulatory compliance obligations were being met honestly. A statutory notification failure is not an internal quality matter. It is a regulatory matter that the board has governance responsibility for. The committee chair needed to know what the inspection report actually said, and she needed to know it from the records rather than from a characterization of the records. A colleague in the pharmacovigilance function who had joined after the program's implementation asked me what the most important professional habit was in compliance work. Not the technical practice, but the professional habit that protected both the work and the person doing it. I told her it was this. The compliance record is the most durable professional document that exists in this field. The adverse event data, the signal detection reports, the quality management system submissions, the escalation records. These are created in the course of doing the work correctly, and they say exactly what the work produced. When a compliance function does its job accurately and documents that accuracy through the systems the organisation has built for that purpose, the record reflects it with a precision that no subsequent characterization can fully override. The inspection report had cited my submission because my submission was in the quality management system, time-stamped and complete, and the HPRA had read it during the inspection. They had read it because the records had been produced accurately, not because I had prepared anything specifically for that moment. The record had been built in the ordinary course of doing the work correctly. She asked what I would recommend as the single most important documentation practice. I told her to use the quality management system's formal submission pathway for every signal escalation, even when informal communication might seem sufficient. The formal pathway creates the timestamp, the receipt notation, and the escalation record that constitutes the compliance documentation. Informal communication, a verbal update, an email outside the system, does not. The formal pathway is the one the regulators look at. It is the one that says what happened. She nodded. She pulled up the quality management system and asked me one technical question about the notification timeline fields in the submission form. I answered it precisely. She returned to the adverse event data she had been reviewing. The follow-up assessment records are filed. The notification pathway is functioning as designed.
3 signal escalations have been processed through the new pathway in the period since implementation. All 3 have generated simultaneous notifications. All 3 have been escalated to the HPRA within the statutory deadlines. All 3 are documented completely in the quality management system. The compliance record is current and accurate. It reflects what the work produced. That is, in this field, the only standard that has ever mattered.